Good morning, everybody. This is Nancy Phillips. I coordinate the Illinois Family Resource Center. We're going to be doing Building Healthy Parenting for Recovery. This is a workshop I have done in a 3-hour version before, where we had a lot of interaction, and I've done it several times, an overview like we're going to do today. There's just a lot of information and a lot of things to think about as we go through this, because it's really just a basic overview of some of the issues and some of the concerns and some of the wonderful things that you can do as you start that parenting back in an early recovery process. The Illinois Family Resource Center started in 2015. And it addresses looking at the issues around families as far as substance use disorder, mental health, gambling, those types of things. The website that we have is listed there. This is my email address, and also my cell phone, which is the easiest way to catch me. And I encourage you to use these if you have any questions. Joining me today is Christina Drum. You there, Christina?
I'm here.
Yeah, she's here. She is the Ross coordinator for Cumberland and Clark County. And when I started doing the monthly webinars, it's been well over a year ago, almost 2 years ago, we linked up with the recovery communities through the Ross councils. And I always like to give whoever's online with me just a minute to explain what ROSC is for those of you that don't know, because it's an absolutely wonderful concept of looking at supporting recovery in communities and getting everybody involved in that and getting rid of the stigma that goes with it. So Christina, if you want to explain that for a minute, take over.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. So ROSC stands for Recovery Oriented Systems of Care. It is a state-funded program underneath the Our House in Charleston. We aim to build healthy recovery communities and show others that recovery is possible. To achieve this, we collaborate with persons in recovery and local key stakeholders to reduce barriers surrounding substance use disorder, break the stigma, and ensure that youth, adults, and families have access to substance use disorder services and support within the community. I'm done, Nancy.
You're done, huh? Okay. Well, you do a good job. Thank you. I'll just do a real quick overview. I'm not going to do an advertisement of the Resource Center because we have so much information to cover this morning. But the goal of the Family Resource Center is to provide information and support around substance use disorder, mental health issues, gambling disorder. And we provide that information for human service providers, for parents, for significant others, and through communities through a lot of different ways, which is where Ross comes in. That has been, in the last 3 years, an absolutely wonderful way to get more word out, looking at families and the impact of all of this and the chaos, and also supporting the people experiencing the disorders and the issues. My background comes from being in this field for over 40 years. So I've seen a lot of change, I've seen a lot of growth, and I've seen a lot of success, and I've seen some sad things. My experience, if you noticed at the beginning where with the credentials, I have PLE, person of lived experience. My lived experience comes through the role of being a family member, child of, wife of, mother of, grandmother of, 4 generations of people experiencing these different issues. And I have such a passion for supporting families that I'm lucky to have the job that I have. I've done prevention at the state level. I have also been certified as an addictions counselor for many, many years, and I have worked on the treatment side and direct service. I no longer do direct service, but I certainly help people that do. gather new information, look at new strategies, and we're a resource center for everybody in our communities. And I think that that's something that we're really grateful to have. We do that through website postings. Take a look at our website, Facebook page that's put in. We do monthly webinars. I can do webinars on request, and I do. I've been doing this year a series of webinars for the CASA violence and more set up, looking at different issues around families and substance use disorder, and from their aspect of being a volunteer that's an advocate there for the children. So there's lots of different ways we can do that. We do technical assistance and facilitation if you're doing planning around how do we address things in our community, in our area, in our organization. We can do individualized in-service presentations, which means all these topics I do in general in a webinar can be fine-tuned to a specific organization, and that's how we address that. We can do the webinars by Zoom or in person. Thank goodness we're back to in person. I love going out and being with people and interacting. I do many conferences and exhibits and workshops throughout the year, passing out that information, and I spend a lot of time I'm just looking up research information and linking into new things. So that's really what the Resource Center is all about. If you have any comments or questions, put it in chat. Christina's monitoring that for me. I do things pretty casual. So if something comes in there that she thinks needs to be addressed or she wants to make sure I'm aware of when I haven't had a chance to check, let me know. The other thing is when this is over, you will get your certificate with your CEUs, your continuing education credits. Excuse me, my voice, I've had 10 webinars this week and my voice is about gone. Also, I will send out the slides with it because there'll be many things you may want to look back and refer to. What we're going to do today is look at some of the impact of parental substance use disorder on children and in child development, look at some of the barriers, not just barriers, but also some of the just issues for healthy parenting in early recovery. We'll look at the role of the extended family and community in positive parenting recovery. What can they provide? What can we do to help parents resume that role? And then I have at the end, I want to spend at least 10 to 15 minutes just looking at different resources and parenting programs and things that are available. So if you see me kind of go, whoops, let's check the time, understand that I think that's important. And you will also get all of that along with some other things that I'll send out to you at the end of this. I real quickly wanted to look at just some data that came out. I've had this about 2 weeks and put it into this presentation, looking at the children at risk of SUD. And the recent data from the CDC was deaths increasing by 30% from 2019 to 2020. This impacts our families, it impacts our recovery, it impacts our children. And from 2011 to 2016, there's been an increase of placement into foster care that was related to substance use indicators. This is national information. I didn't break down a lot of Illinois because there just wasn't time, but I will send out some of those resources. And there's been a real particular concern for young children as we looked at the impact of substance use disorder on families and how do we support families and help families get healthier. The Resource Center's funding started out looking at adolescents, and then it went to transitional age youth, and then it was opened up broadly to looking at entire families. And what has emerged over the last 2 or 3 years is the requests that I get, the information I get, and the linkages I get are really focusing on younger children and the impact because it just seems to be escalating. We aren't going to leave the others out, but I think that it's good information to have, and this seemed to be a good fit. We know between 2010 and 2017, the national rate of neonatal abstinence syndrome, which we know is FAS, FAE, fetal alcohol exposure to substances before birth increased from 4.0 to 7.3 per 1,000 birth hospitalizations. That's a lot, and it's scary and it's sad. The increases are associated very strongly with the number of infants going into foster care, and there's a whole study out there on that. I was in a webinar yesterday that really expanded on that and had some concerning information, but good information about that. And I just wanted to define that so you really know what we're talking about. That's a condition that affects newborns who receive opioids or other addictive substances through the placenta during the pregnancy. And the babies quite often will have withdrawal symptoms during their first few days of life, but when they're checked and there are traces of substances, then that definitely is a trigger point to bring in other resources and help for that child. And it often ends up being in a neonatal care. The number and percentage of children living with a parent, this came out of this same study, who had substance use disorder in the past year, this is national average, was broken down here. And I thought it was just kind of interesting to take a look at that. I'm not going to read it to you because you can look at that in closer time. I do want to just briefly go through this because I think it is a wonderful tool that I just love. It was in a workshop that I went to put on by Generations United, and look that up. It has wonderful resources about kin care and the generational care of children, especially as it's related to substance use disorder. And this came from a workshop webinar that Generations United and the National Center on Substance Abuse and Child Welfare put on. And I think it's just a really good tool to take a look at what's going on with children in the homes where there's substance use disorder. And then these are the children and the parents that in the parents' recovery we're wanting to support and to work with. Just looking at the home life's chaotic, unpredictable, inconsistent parenting and lack of appropriate supervision, inconsistent emotional responses from parents to children, secrecy, don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. We've known for years. I grew up with that. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. And many of us have. Many of us that are on here have. Parental behavior that may make the child feel guilt, shame, or self-blame. Even little ones. There was research that came out about 2 years ago that was looking at the issue of trauma and children as it was related to substance use disorder. And it was sharing that children as young as 2 months that are in an environment where they aren't getting those developmental needs met at 2 months. It creates a level of trauma that shows up as they grow up and later in life that has to be addressed for healthy living. That's frightening, 2 months of age. Emotional challenges. Children develop feelings that they have to be perfect. That was me. I loved my dad and I had a lot of respect for him. He was a highly functioning alcoholic, but he always left the message that we have to be better than what we were, which was kind of interesting to work through. Mm-hmm. Believing that you have to be a parent to your parent, that so often happens. Difficulty trusting others and maintaining a sense of attachment, difficulty achieving positive self-esteem, an extreme shyness and aggressiveness. Looking at all those. Okay, let's see here. Adjustment difficulties. Children who grow up in inconsistent environment or with limited guidance are at risk for resistance to rules or authority. Many of us see these children as they come in preteen and early teenage years with their own issues around substance use and mental health. And even now we're seeing more and more younger people into the gambling picture. Experimentation with or use of alcohol or other drugs, social withdrawal and difficult relationships with peers, adults, and others. This is the environment that is often out there. Whoops, wrong direction. I have put in here in these throughout this some tools just to kind of give you some things to think about and things that you can look up as you go along. This is a really good book, What Makes a Family, looking at what is a family and looking at the different dynamics as families come back together. The other thing that I think I wanted to put up here was really looking at Sam's tip 39. This is such a simple and great stages of recovery to look at. And we're really looking at these. As far as the individual recovery and the family, these first two areas, we're talking about the early stages and of parents and children trying to put that role back together and working on that. And us, how do we support that? So taking a look at that's just a good little tool. We know children whose parents misuse drugs or alcohol, they can be separated from their parents for long-term or short-term for many different reasons, but really looking at these are the issues that we're going to be addressing as we look at helping parents build up that role again. Intervention from children's services, which is, your welfare issues and court issues, that kind of thing. Parents that go to prison or are incarcerated for some reason, parents being hospitalized, either due to mental health or physical things that have happened to them as a result of their use, an overdose or death. And too often our kids really do take on that role of caregiver for the family, taking care of younger siblings, taking care of the parents. The impacts of abuse and neglect on the children's brains can stretch beyond childhood and into adulthood. But as we look at what the role of the parent is, as they step in and become that parent again, it's important just to take a look at this. The possible impacts include impaired cognitive development, inhibited executive function skills, and weakened immune system. Just the trauma and stress that children experience in homes where the chaos is there or being removed from the home because of the chaos and because of the situations. We don't think about their physical health, but it does impact it, that weakened immune system, that stress level that they carry with them and the trauma that they carry. So I want to take a look at these issues as we're moving forward. What are the issues of healthy parenting as that recovery journey develops? And what are some of the whoa, it's one of those mornings, it's Friday morning, folks. What are the support resources to consider? As we look at a parenting role in recovery, the ability to plan and prioritize is really important. You're coming into your recovery. So as you are leaving the culture of the substance use, et cetera, how do you plan and prioritize your role as a parent? Innovative and creative thinking, we know, is very important for children. It stimulates their learning. It can lessen the trauma. It can create healthier relationships. So having that ability and working toward that ability is important. The ability to negotiate is very important. Often with the courts or caregivers, you have to learn that negotiation in order to move back into the role of parent. Being a quick learner and adapting to new information. If you haven't been in that role of parent in the appropriate way, your children will surprise you because they may be moving very fast and you haven't been able to keep up with that. So be a quick learner and adapt to the new information that they share, and be sure and work on good communication skills. Learn to meet your children where they are, listen to where they are, and helping the people that you work with in treatment or in the community or through your faith. If you're working with families, learning that communication skills important. Anything I need to address, Christina, yet?
No, I don't think so. The one question that was asked, you answered it, so.
Okay, good. There's a developmental role that the children have. Cognitive development is really important as they're coming back together with the parents. Read to those kids, help the parents learn how to read, tell stories, share things. Sociocultural development, how do they fit into their community? If they've been living in a family where there's all kinds of chaos and then even possibly removed and put into a different environment, that may even be a different culture. And now they're moving slowly back into that relationship with their parents. Part of that developmental role is helping them fit back into that sociocultural area. Physical development, making sure children have the support for the appropriate physical development and taking care of their immune systems and lessening the stress. Mental development the same way. And especially if you have a child that's had prenatal exposure, you can have some real issues around cognitive development, physical development, and mental development. And then the spiritual development, understanding that they are part of something far beyond themselves. And if you have a parent that's truly in a healthy recovery situation or recovery journey, they have learned that about themselves too. And they can share that. I love this picture. I like the big bear or the little bear book. This is another book resource that's really great for young children to help them understand the dynamics of drugs and alcohol, the addiction monster. I have that in my home. Having had two different generations placed in our guardianship because of either mental health or substance use, I have a lot of these resources, and I live by the serenity prayer, folks. I have learned that's what keeps me sane, and that's what helps me move forward and believe that what I can share and all of you can share in this environment can help our children. Often for children lost in the development process is grief, and I do quite a few trainings on grief and the grief process and the impact with families on substance use recovery. But I think that it's especially important to take a look at some of the information that is out there now that we know our children. We know grief is a natural reaction to loss, and children lose a lot when they're living in an environment where there's substance use disorder. And they don't realize that they're grieving, and oftentimes we don't realize they're grieving. And I think that it's something that we need to increase that awareness of. And what is really important is this relocation stress syndrome. RSS is physical or psychological, and a lot of that depends on the age of the child. Disturbance transfer from one place to another. A move is often just a beginning of all the changes and some of the trauma that can be created in the chaos of a parent with substance use disorder and a child possibly being removed, placed with either into foster care or hopefully into kin care, which the research shows is much healthier for children in most instances. And adjusting to grief is part of the process, and we need to be able to support children. But we need to support the parents, because I am a firm believer that there's not a parent that doesn't care. But that doesn't mean that they can function as a good and healthy parent. So they're going to feel a loss. They're going to feel grief. They're going to feel a lot of guilt. So I think it's important that we recognize that as we're working with them. Because I noticed, I looked at who was registered for this, and the roles on here are so diverse. You aren't all providers. You aren't all community people. There is a very diverse group of people on here, and which is good because we can share this information within our communities, within our faith, within our spiritual area, within the different roles that we play in providing health care and mental health, taking a look at that. Just to define the relocation stress syndrome, I pulled up 2 or 3 resources, and they basically said the same thing. I'm very aware of this. We had guardianship of a great-granddaughter from 2 months until this spring when she was about 5.5. And she had some RSS. She's adjusted beautifully. She's in a good place. She's where she needs to be. But there was definitely some transfer trauma that we had to work through and still do, using the tools and skills that we know are available to help this adjustment for her. Sometimes it's called transfer trauma. Relocation stress syndrome is a set of symptoms that occur when a child or an individual, sometimes this happens with senior citizens that are moved into a senior center or something, where you're moved from one environment to another, and the symptoms can influence your behavior, they influence your mood, your psychological well-being, and you go through a series of grief for a while. Here's another book that's good, A Sober Mom's Guide to Recovery. A lot of what I pulled out of the rest of this comes from 3 or 4 of the books that were written by moms who've actually experienced this role. And so I like to put these in here. I also think that we ought to take a look at some of the old school thoughts. New parents that are new to a recovery journey may be experiencing some things that we oftentimes, as the field has grown and new theories have come out, don't look at quite as much, but it's still there. Post-acute withdrawal syndrome, where the brain's still healing. It's jumping from one day you feel like there's a hamster wheel in your brain, and the next day you can barely get out of bed. And this can go on, off and on. It gets better with time, but off and on for a year or two. And then looking at HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. You're coming out of one environment, you're working on a recovery journey that's new, everything's new. Even if you've tried it before, that's even maybe a little scarier, because there's that, oh my gosh, what if I don't make it again this time? Looking at these things that can get in the way. So consider how this may impact the issues of early recovery parenting. And when you're talking with parents and working with them, think about this. I've got 2 slides that are issues of recovery, and these have come out of different resources of people that are in recovery themselves. And I think that they've been really good tools. I'm just checking my time here, folks. Looking at issues of recovery, just getting your basic human needs met is important. I did enough years of direct service, more than one time, and in a couple of different environments, that I think that it's important that we look at these. Which reminds me, as I introduced things and got Christina on, I didn't mention that we are funded in whole or in part by the Department of Human Services and then the Division of Substance Use Prevention and Recovery. Both ROSC that Christina works with and the Illinois Family Resource Center, those contracts are held by the Our House in Charleston. The Resource Center is a statewide program, and the ROSCs are by each county. I wanted to get that in. It's too easy to jump through that stuff when you get excited about what you're doing. So we're looking at basic human needs. How do you get those met? Depends on where you are, what kind of support systems you have. But one of the main issues that came out in all the stuff that I've read and experienced in watching people go through this, and the other thing, and looking at restoring a parenting role, I was the parent of someone that went through treatment. Not the parent, well, I was the parent of someone that went through treatment. I was also the spouse of someone that went through treatment 40 some years ago. And yes, he's still sober. Recovery works, folks. But we were parents of 3 children. And as we go through some of this, I'll give you the other side. It's not just looking at the issues of recovery and healthy recovery for the parent that's experiencing the disorders. It impacts the other. So you're going to look at the restoring the parenting role. What's the legal status of the parenting role? Do you have legal access to the child? Are you working toward it? Was it never an issue? Is there the other parent that has taken over? You know, it's figuring that out, and it needs help. You need somebody to guide you. What are those resources? What are the safety issues? Where are you going to go? Do you have somewhere to go as you leave treatment? What's the safety of the housing environment if you're going to step back into that role of parenting and have your child there? Where's the money coming from to live off of? Are you going to be able to work and meet these other needs? And it depends, a lot of it depends on the age of the child. So knowing where those resources are, knowing that as you come out of treatment services and into, maybe residential and into outpatient services, looking at who those people are that can help support that. Who is your therapist, your counselor, your recovery navigator that works with through the ROSC areas that can help you with that and look at that. Where is there support from the faith-based entities in your community? And we need to help people find that. Daycare needs, depending on the age of the child. Licensed healthy daycare is not the easiest thing to find, and there's been a lot less of it available since the pandemic. It's a problem, and it's going to be different in every area, every geographic area, every community. So these are issues of recovery. I don't have magic answers, but we need to be taking a look at that. Transportation. Do you live in a rural area that has no public transportation? Do you have the money to have a car? Do you have the money to pay for insurance? Legally, can you do it? Because if you have a history of drug charges, oftentimes that license is challenged. And then the whole thing of you come out of your using environment, you start on a healthy recovery. And I have seen more than once, especially during my years of supervising outpatient services. I had and we worked very closely with DCFS, so we oftentimes had a variety of dynamics. But the person wanted to be a super mom or dad. They wanted to make up for everything that they knew had been challenged in their use. And with that goes a lot of guilt. Guilt creates exhaustion. Just trying to address these things on a daily basis creates exhaustion. And here you are trying to adjust physically and emotionally to a new way of living. And with all the support systems that are out there, they aren't necessarily the magic answers, but they're what you need to keep going. And there's that sense of loneliness. Part of this is a grief process. You're changing your environment. Your group of so-called friends are no longer your support system. If you haven't been able to address issues with family members that felt hurt or you had opposition with during your using, there's that sense of loneliness, an issue in recovery, just building up relationship issues. What is this, and relationship issues are varied. If you were married, still married, that's a relationship issue that you're probably going to be active in, back in, and hopefully they're participating in their own recovery journey with you. But if they aren't, that's a concern, and that's where you need to get the resources and help. And we need to be able to think about how we can help our families, young families, new families do this. My husband in treatment obviously was married. We had 3 children, 1 in kindergarten and 2 that were older. And he went into residential, then he went into outpatient. The environment was different 40 years ago. We did a lot of Al-Anon, a lot of AA, and HIPAA wasn't in place. So there was a little more openness to some of the things that we could do with the community. But our relationship was different. And I had a tendency, it was then that I got my own checking account because it scared me. This was a person that I'd lived with and I knew his history. And even though we're still together, folks, it was something to think about. Our children had some resentment toward him. Who are you to come back into our house and tell us how to live, what to do, when you didn't follow through with your commitments before? So it's looking at those relationship issues. How do you build those back? And if you aren't in one, we know that people early in recovery, we say, don't get into a relationship for a year or 2. Take time, take care of yourself, work towards things. but oftentimes it happens. So what's the safety of those relationships for your children? When is your time for your recovery efforts? If you're going to take back over that role of parent, what do you do with the child when you're working on your outpatient services, your self-help groups, looking for a job? There's all these barriers that seem to pop up there, but we can also find ways to help support that. And you need to find time to have healthy fun and celebrate the recovery. Issues of recovery. I'm going to keep going a little bit because as I read more of these resources and I've looked at information that was out there and read a lot of the stories that people in recovery have offered as they've gone through this process, it just seemed like the list kept getting longer and longer, and I kept condensing it. But there's just some things I think we can't leave out. Being able to think about how to handle relapse and triggers. As you're parenting, the child's screaming, I'm not getting any sleep, they're arguing with me. They're old enough to say, well, I remember when. It's a tough way to go. Then figuring out who's the boss. Is the parent the boss of the child, or is the child's caregiver that was maybe in that role, grandparent, aunt, uncle, some kind of kin care? It's increasing, folks. In Illinois, it's continuing to increase due to substance use disorder primarily. And it's not just grandparents now. Even the Department on Aging that has funded the Grandparents Raising Grandchildren efforts in Illinois is changing its terminology to kin care, because the number of children not in their parental care but in their kin care is increasing to not just grandparents but pulling in other family members. We have that in my family. I have a granddaughter who's got her niece, and we couldn't take on another one. It's got her niece and is providing wonderful care for her, but it's looking at those and then looking at the boundaries for the child's behavior. Who sets those boundaries? Who sets those rules and roles? If the child has been with kin care and is now back with the parent and you're trying to transition that, it's not easy. How do you take care of yourself? How do you find time to just breathe, to reduce the stress? How do you balance recovery and parenting responsibilities? Taking a look at healthcare for yourself and the child. And then there's always a big question. The years that I spent working for Prevention First and doing trainings and attending many, many, many conferences, because that was a lot of what was going on back in the time when I was there, it came up almost continually. How much do I share with my child? I'm in recovery, and I don't know what to tell them when they ask. So it's figuring that out, getting some help with that. There's I won't say lots. There are many resources that will give you responses to that, and you have to figure out what fits for you and your child. And I kind of already had done some of this, 2 views of the role to parenting on the recovery journey. You're working with the parent on their recovery journey on how they become a parent, but the parenting partner or the child's caregiver has their own view. When you're supporting someone on a recovery journey, it's often difficult to turn over that parenting role, especially if there was any threat or neglect. You have to build that trust all over again. It's like, who are you? Do I trust you after the broken promises? I did all the care and discipline before. Why should I give you that power now? It's not to be mean. It's because of concern for the child. And there might be some, I don't want to give up my role, but I was thrilled that my husband went into treatment. But there were still those issues that we had to look at. And I think that we know that's very prominent out there. Okay. We're just about where I want to be. Here's another good book, Sober Dad, the manual for perfectly imperfect parenting, taking a look from the dad's viewpoint, because we have dads taking over that role. My 5-year-old great granddaughter that we had guardianship of is with her dad, not the mom. Whoops. Okay. What now? We need to learn and understand the concept of continuing care. We need to encourage families to do that. If you're on a recovery journey, keep working on it. Don't leave the support systems that can help you address all those issues that we talked about and work with them. We need to learn how to talk to the parent about abstinence after their treatment, learn how to set guidelines, monitor, and communicate in a non-threatening manner. Parents need to be shown respect, even though some of their behaviors may be difficult for us to do and to respect. I believe that every human being needs to be treated with a level of respect, and it works wonders. It really does. It's vital to build safe and trusting relationships. If you're in a role of working with families and parents, help parents and children know they can speak out about problems they're experiencing so that we can look at helping that role in that recovery journey. It may involve teaching parents and caregivers and children what neglect is and how they can get help, or what, not just neglect, but other things that are important. Help them identify what issues are so that they don't just cover it up and say, oh, there's nothing wrong, and then suddenly it's going to explode. We know families that suffer setbacks, relapses happen. It's important in your role to provide the parents a support network, be able to step in and help where possible. Help them learn the dialogue or the language to talk with their children about what happened. There's many different ways. Educating extended family members, especially caregivers of the children, previous caregivers of the children, or people that are helping support the parent in their recovery journey. Make sure they understand the impact of the substance misuse on children and families, and the way that they can start to heal. That what they've used as survival skills can then be turned around and used as recovery skills. And that can be exciting to figure that out. I put this in here, and I'm going to send you the full piece of it, the Center for the Study of Social Policy. When engaging with families, strength-based steps for engaging with families, I love this. Express empathy. Don't go into it judgmental. Although I know it's difficult, I've been in this field for over 40 years. Sometimes that's tough, but it becomes a way of changing your way of thinking and looking at things. Ask good questions, ask open-ended questions, ask questions that can bring out strengths. Provide information and perspective that's positive to help people move forward. Help develop strategies that can work toward goals of the family coming together and staying together. When you can, coach, model, and mentor. That's not always easy, but when that opportunity is there with longer interactions, even the words you use can help lessen the stigma that goes with all their experience, and the words you use can help them learn how to talk with their children, dialogue with their children about what's going on, and be sure and lift up their successes. What are their strengths and what are their successes? This is a book I love, Everything Changes. My copy has all these Post-it notes in there. It's really from the family's perspective of, I thought everything was going well and then this happened, and how do we address that and turn it around so that it's positive? If you get a chance to get that book, I would suggest you pick it up and take a look at it. It will help you strengthen your skills for working with this parenting journey with your parents. Okay, let's see. Effective parenting assessment should focus on the child and their needs. Allow children to discuss their experiences when they can. Listen to and record. I mean, I think you may not want to use a tape recorder, but listen to and record the child's views on a situation. So when you're working with the parents and you're helping them strengthen their parent role and move through that, you know what's going on in the child's perspective too, if they're old enough to share that. Otherwise, you need to be watching, you need to observe, take notes of the interaction between the parents and their children. Use positive reinforcement with things that are going well. Treat children, parents, and caregivers as individuals. Those caregivers have been there for those parents and those children. And I'm one of those. We need to be recognized as an important part of that process. Usually, majority of the time it's positive, but not always. So you need to be aware of that too. What are those warning signs? And make sure that parents know they're being listened to. What are their concerns? What are their fears? What are they thinking? What are they frightened by? What do they need help with? Set realistic and timely goals, which focus on solutions as best you can rather than problems. It's a good role for us to take. And another thing is make sure younger children are taken to daycare, to the nursery, to school when they need to be there. Make sure older children are not missing school. These are triggers that you want to watch for, because if children are missing school, if there's truancy, you're going to have other roles coming in, and it may not always be so positive. So helping them understand the importance of these things happening, of them not missing school, of them being in an appropriate, safe daycare, that children get help with their schoolwork so that they aren't failing. I was in a program last night that was addressing some of those things with parents that had been identified as needing support and someone to walk along with them in a positive way to help these things stay on a successful journey. Children are taken to all necessary medical appointments and checkups, including dental. That often is tough, especially if you have trouble getting your children the insurance that you need. Medicaid has these things available, but it's not always geographically in the easiest place to address them, even though the services might be covered. Help them figure that out. And I love this. We don't want children being afraid of the positive support systems that are out there for them. Education and emotional support are offered by many services. Family services, our self-help groups, all our people that are providing services for substance use disorder, mental health, gambling disorder. We have faith-based groups. Hospice does groups around grief and loss, and it's not just grief and loss over death, but other types of loss, major things in your family. You can get resources there. We have Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, Gam-Anon, the Anons that are out there for families to help grow with, as well as our people that are in recovery going to their appropriate group. Celebrate Recovery, Smart Recovery. These are all great resources. And now we're going to kind of switch. I'm going to take you through some resources for you to look at. Understanding Addiction and Recovery Through a Child's Eyes was written by Jerry Moe, who is one of the founders of the National Association for Children of Addiction, which has really provided a lot of well, I'll tell you a little more about that in a minute. Jerry Moe is one of my heroes. I think that he has done phenomenal work with children and families and helping parents on that recovery journey take back over that role. And this is a great book to read, even though it's been out a few years. He will be here in Illinois at the Endangered child, the Drug Endangered Child Conference here in May. So if you get a chance to take a look at that, it would be worth it. He worked and ran the children's programs at Hazleton Betty Ford Center for years and has just retired and is now doing consulting. Celebrating Families is a wonderful, one of the few curriculum that is out there as a parenting program for parents in recovery themselves. It's not a prevention program of let's go to learn how to keep our children from using. This encompasses 0 through the whole lifespan. And it is an evidence-based program. And it is overseen and the training is done by the national trainers from the National Association for Children of Addiction, better known as NACOA. The Family Resource Center last year and again this year is bringing in those trainers. And each year we have trained 4 teams, community teams, to deliver this training. And I think that we'll probably continue that next year because it's been very well received throughout the state. And the thing that's interesting this year, we have 4 different Ross Council teams that are going to be going through that. And I encourage you to just go online and take a look at it if you're interested in your community. NACOA also has a kit for kids, and it's just been totally redone and put out. It's been around for many years. And this is just something that can be done in schools, in groups, in community groups for children. And I think it's 4 sessions just to kind of help kids understand a little more about substance use disorder and the things that they can do to take care of themselves. They talk a lot about the 7 C's. Another resource is Sesame Street and Communities. Actually, Jerry Moe has written a lot of and developed a lot of the resources for Sesame Street. If you go to Sesame Street and Communities, you will find phenomenal resources for about any issue that enters a child's life. And substance use disorder is one of them. But it is an incredible website to go to and take a look at. And I wanted to put, these are some of the activity sheets that come off the one on addiction. Confident Parenting and Recovery is a video put out by Hazleton. It came out about 2 years ago, maybe 3. And it's a series of looking at all of the things that parents early in their recovery need to be taking a look at. And it's little sharing of experience. And there's probably 25 or 30 of them on this video. That's about 5 minutes long, maybe, looking at all the different issues that occur when a parent is early in recovery and trying to take back over that role. And if you get an opportunity to get that, I would encourage you to take a look at it, because it's, especially if you're a therapist or a counselor and you're going to be doing work with that, it's not one you would necessarily show the parents, although depending on the parent, you know your the people you're working with well enough to know whether to do that or not. It's just really a powerful series of resources. Family Strategies, Claudia Black, who is also one of the founders of NACOA, because she did some of the earliest work in looking at children and the dynamics of families and the impact that substance, especially alcoholism in her earlier days, but she has updated almost all her materials, and she has many, many, many publications and videos out. I've been fortunate enough over the years, after 40 years of being in the field, to have seen her quite a few times. Take a look at this, Family Strategies, Practical Tools. All of these materials can be purchased basically off Amazon. Even the Hazleton materials, you can go to Hazleton or Amazon and get these materials looking at this. Claudia now has her stuff available there. And this has just been updated not long ago. It's for working with families and building those roles of being able to communicate and address the chaos. Strengthening Families program is many levels. This is the video version for at home, and it's really life skills building. Carol Comfer has been doing work in the field for 25, 30 years at least. And Strengthening Families is her primary program, and it comes in all different kinds of versions. It started out as being more of a prevention program for parents and children and building life skills, but it is also widely used internationally as far as treatment goes with young people that are experiencing substance use disorder and working on the family issues that are occurring. And when I say, we have to remember that we have a lot of young parents. When we moved from looking at adolescent services and went to transitional age youth, that just opened the doors. Transitional age youth, which is identified as 18 to 25-year-olds, many of them are parents already. So it's not just looking at them as the child of someone else, but it's looking at them as the parent. And many of our parents in early recovery fall in that age bracket. I had 2 children at that time. Addict in the Family is another good one. You're just looking at those dynamics and how do we put it back together? What can we do? Dear David, dealing with my son's addiction. This isn't necessarily about parenting, but I put it in here because it is a series of letters that a mother wrote to her son over a year's time. And she didn't give them to him, but they were ones that she wrote to process what she needed to do to take care of herself. And I just think it's such a powerful book that I wanted to put it in there as a resource for those of you that might be looking for something to, even personally, to get through chaos and see hope at the end. And the last thing I have here is another one of Claudia Black's. It Will Never Happen to Me, Growing Up with Addiction as Youngsters, Adolescents, and Adults. This book came out many years ago, but it's in its 3rd edition. It's been updated, and it's also very good reading if you're going to be working with young parents or parents that are new in recovery, young in their recovery, we'll put it that way. It's another good tool. So I have all of these, and I think that that's enough. That's probably going to keep you busy looking it up if you're interested in any of these. Christine, is there anything before I sign off here?
There's really no questions to answer. A couple of people said this was a great session and appreciate the different resources. So
it's what I am, is I'm a resource center. But I think that you can follow through with those. It'll probably be the end of next week before I get out the certificates with the CEUs. Yes, you do have a CEU, an hour CEU for the training, and it will have a certificate. And like I said, I will be sending out some other resources as well as the slideshow. I think that would be fine. And don't hesitate to contact me if you have questions, needs, if you want to do more of this. This will also be on our website, probably posted.
Nancy,
yes.
Someone asked when the 3-hour version of this will be. Sorry to interrupt you.
Okay, well, the 3-hour version's been delivered at conferences. If you think you're really if there's someone that's really interested in that, we will take a look at that. I have got a consultant that's going to be doing some work with me this spring, and the 2 of us are going to be doing some stuff very similar to this that also addresses adult children of alcoholics too. So I'll keep everybody posted and make sure that they get the information.
And then someone asked if you have a mailing list.
Yes and no. My computer crashed last fall and they weren't ever able to retrieve all that stuff. So I'm building it. And since you are on here and I have your email stuff, you will be getting stuff from me. But don't hesitate. And like I started to say, the recording of this will be posted on the website under, not under videos, but we have a YouTube channel on the Resource Center's website. So you can go back and listen to me stumble over my words on a Friday morning. So I thank you all. There is a survey that will pop up, and I would appreciate it if you would fill it out. And I will get this information out to you within the next week. And I thank you all. And thank you, Christina.
You're welcome.